And you might have the small beginning tonight that changes everything for you. Tonight may be the night that changes the trajectory of your legacy. Tonight may be the night that causes you to go to another level of success in your business or in your family. Tonight may be the night that you actually see a way that you could change the world. That's how important tonight is. See, it's no coincidence you're in the room. No matter who you are, what generation you make up, what your title is or has been, you are specifically in this room for a reason. And you're here to hear something that is meant to take you in a new direction, a direction that's exciting. And the goal of tonight is just to stop for a little bit and slow down and think about why things are the way they are, wherever you're from. We're all ripping and running. We're all busy people. We get stuff done. But tonight's just a night to sit for an hour and just think about why are things the way they are? Because we live in unique times. The goal simply tonight is this. We want you to become people that know the times and know what to do. If you're seen as someone that knows the times, knows what's going on out there, and you have solutions to someone's problem, people want what you got. They want to invite you to the table. And in a word, you're relevant. And the opposite is true. If people see that you don't have what they need, that you don't have a clue what's going on out there, you can't solve a problem for them, they just don't want to talk to you. And irrelevance is a terrible place to be. And what I'd like for this group to know is that you can walk out of here being so much more relevant in the world that you're in, whether that's the business world, government, education, nonprofit, just your family, the church, or this community, or any community you're in. That's the goal of tonight. So I thank you for the chance to be here. There are two numbers that stand in the way of your success, no matter who you are. Two numbers, 8 and 4. These numbers are the worst numbers in your life. They're absolutely costing you relationships and money and time. What do they mean? 8 is the 8 seconds. It's the average attention span of someone today. Did you know research shows that goldfish have 9 seconds of attention span? So people have less attention spans than goldfish, and you have very complicated messages to talk about. How you doing? Let me ask you a very honest question. Take yourself back in your mind's eye over the last 12 months and think about every presentation that you've given, every pitch that you've done, every meeting you've conducted, every one-on-one conversation with someone. Think about what all's happened with you over the last year. How much time did you spend thinking about what you would say in the first 8 seconds? I get a chance to work with global leaders and teams, and I'll just tell you, people don't think about their audience. They just don't think. And here's the deal. If you're not bringing value to someone else, you're taking up space. If tonight, if all I talk about is something that's important to me and it has no relevance to you, I'm just wasting your time and my time. And the point is that you need to understand people are looking for you to bring them value, something they value, not what you find valuable. So 8 seconds is a big, big challenge no matter what you do out there. And I would challenge you to start thinking about what you're going to say and who you're saying it to and what do they need to hear from you that's really going to matter. Well, the other number is really why we're here tonight. There's 4 separate generations working side by side right now. And that is causing all kinds of problems. And there's actually a 5th generation that's kind of in the mix, this Gen Z group. And we're going to talk about them tonight as well. But they're not fully in the workforce yet. So that's why they're kind of a bit of an add-on. But there are 4 separate generations working side by side, all wanting it their own way. By gosh, I want it my way. And it's causing all kinds of friction. Different generations are all communicating really differently, right? And we want it the way we want it. Do you remember the old Burger King commercial that says, you can have it your way? Well, that's what we all want. I want it my way. If you don't believe that's true tonight, the next time you go out to dinner, I want you to look inside your sugar bowl. Do you remember a time where you saw sugar in a sugar bowl? And occasionally there was a cube. What do we have now? The white, the pink, the blue, the brown, they don't have yellow here? Do they not know my sweetening needs? Do you know how expensive it is to keep up with your sweetening needs? But that's where we're all living. We have to try and hit everybody's individual needs and preferences, and it's because we have 4 separate generations demanding it of us. If you don't think that's a headwater issue, I want you to think about the place that either you work or some of the places where you go to get a service, like the doctor's office. Is there a process that you can do via paper? You can write out an application, or you can fill in, sign in via paper, but you could also do that exact same process online, right? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, why? Why do we have all that? It's because 4 separate generations are demanding it of you. You have to provide it. It's like the sugar packets. If you don't have it, well, you're irrelevant. But which one do you want? And we're all over the map with this stuff. So let me ask you this. If I was to give you the word opportunity and you were to define it, however you would define it, let me ask you a question. Would someone older than you define it differently? What about someone younger? Probably so. What about the word success? Someone older than you might define that very differently than you. Leadership, customer service. And if we wanted to start a generational riot tonight here in Henderson, we'll throw up these 2 words and let everybody fight over what that means. The bottom line is, this is an actual serious deal, gang. This is a major deal. I get the opportunity to work with equine vets across the country, and these 2 words right here are tearing the equine practices up. Because what's happening is that younger vets are coming into the practice, and older vets are saying, hey, suck it up, Buttercup, you got to do it the way we did it. You got to work 8 days a week, 25 hours a day. And this group is saying, but I don't want to do that exactly. And this group is saying, but you got to be like me. And this group's saying, well, wait a minute, you're on your 3rd marriage and you don't even know your kids from the 1st marriage. You're 75 years old and you got a 10-year-old. I don't want that. Very real. The point simply is that words like this and how different generations define it is really the friction point of everything you're dealing with back home. Whatever it is that you're wrestling with back home rolls up to that. General Patton, in 1944, his 3rd Army was bogged down in this monsoon rainstorm in Western Europe. And he called his chaplain in and he says, Chaplain, I want every man in this army praying that this rain will stop and we can go do what we're called to do. And he says these next words, and he's talking to you and he's talking to me tonight. He said, our job is not to make the best of these days. Our job is to make the most of these days. Gang, the deal is this. 4 generations side by side, never happened before. You cannot pull a manual off of a shelf and go, hey, we'll just do it this way. This has never happened before in U.S. history. And so it's very difficult to know what to do. But instead of complaining about it and being upset over it, what if you made the most of it? What if you were the most relevant people after you left here tonight because you saw a path? And it doesn't matter how old or young you are in this room tonight. Every single one of you are going to have what I call the white Honda effect. The white Honda effect. What's that? If we all went out tonight and bought a white Honda, if you went out and bought a white Honda at the dealership tonight, tomorrow as you're driving to work, you would notice a lot more white Hondas on the road. Did everybody go to the dealership at the same time? No, they were always there. You just didn't see them until you were sensitized to it. And that's what's going to happen tonight. It's going to mess you up. I'm just telling you. You're going to walk out of here going, oh my gosh, there it is again. It's really cool. I love this phrase, and I want to challenge you with it. Don't waste a crisis. And you all have a crisis on your hands tonight. Every single person in this room, and every person in this community that's not in this room, everyone in the Commonwealth of Kentucky and the United States has this crisis. What is it? In the next 18 to 36 months, everything is going to radically change because of generational forces at work. And we're going to talk about how that all shakes out. But that means you've got to make some adjustments in your game. Whoever you are, you can can be retired 20 years. You're going to have to start to think differently because of what's getting ready to happen. It's already upon us in some places, but in the next 18 to 36 months, it's going to go way high. Just look at this changing landscape. I won't read it to you. Just take a look at what's happening out there. When the largest transportation company in America doesn't own a car and the largest hotel chain doesn't own a hotel, things are changing. This is what's happening out there. This is what's going on. And the headwater issue is 4 generations. We're going to talk about that. But the point simply is that you all have to be people that can read a headline like that, see those kinds of headlines, and look past the initial shock value of it. Look past what it says on the surface. And you got to be able to read things deeper to be really relevant. So let me teach you how to read headlines a little differently. I'm going to throw up 3 sports headlines, and I'm going to have you just read them normal, and then I'm going to show you what they're really saying. The first one, interestingly enough, is saying, as an organization, to attract the best and the brightest young talent, we have to change some of our internal policy, our dress code. To attract the best and brightest golfers, in this case in the PGA, they're saying, hey, we have to change and loosen up some of our traditions that say, well, you cannot wear shorts in practice rounds. Now, granted, they didn't change everything. They kept these things the way they were, but this was something that they changed to lure the best and the brightest to their organization. What do you have to change to lure the best and the brightest to you, to this community, to this church? The bottom line to it is you got to make some changes, and some changes are okay to make. Shorts in the practice round. The other 2, the NASCAR and the NBA, are telling you that these 2 multi-billion-dollar entities are saying our customer's changing. And we've got to make some alterations in the service and the product we provide so that we're relevant to that group. Our customer is changing radically. The person we serve and we rely upon for our success is becoming different, and so we need to look at how we offer our service or our product. And you do too. When you read headlines like this after a night like tonight, you're going to start to see, oh, wait, that's what they're really saying. That's what's really going on underneath all that. It's pretty cool. Most people won't get past, especially in that third one, those darn millennials. A bunch of unicorns. Look at them. Well, there's some stuff that you got to know about these guys. You can't go saying that. It's a little dangerous, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. You got 4 generations working side by side right now. Never happened in U.S. history before, but it has happened before. We're going to talk about that and how you can know how to navigate this. But this is the number 1 issue. Here's the deal. Different generations see things differently. Oh, that's worth the price of admission tonight, right? Different generations see things differently, but I want to tell it to you in a way that may bring it home a little bit better. I'm going to name a movie character, and when I name this character, I want you to picture the actor you see first. Ready? James Bond. Now, by show of hands, how many absolutely positively know James Bond is Sean Connery? It's always the most vehement group. People will tear a rotator cuff out. Ah, there's no other diluted pool after him, right? You know, how many know he's Roger Moore? Pierce Brosnan, the new guy, Daniel Craig, who's now the old guy, right? Here's the deal, gang. James Bond's the same character. But depending upon when you grew up and what movies you saw, you just saw him completely different potentially than your neighbor. Well, what does that have to do with you tonight? I don't know. Maybe the different generations can see the exact same thing totally different. Things like, what is fair compensation? What's the definition of a good benefits plan? What's the definition of community? Different generations define it differently. And what's happening and the frustration that you feel no matter what you do comes from that. When you know this, you know the times. And now you can start to think about, well, what do I do? How do I solve other people's pain? And when you can do that, you're the most relevant person in the room, the most relevant organization, the most relevant community. Different generations see things differently. So let me start at the headwaters. Let me start at something that's happening to you right now, and it is causing you great pain, and you don't know it. It's causing this community pain, it's causing your company or organization pain, and it's causing you personal pain. It's something called the compression of the two tens. The compression of the two tens. Every day, two number 10s get closer together, and they're putting pressure on you, and it hurts. What are they? First number 10 is this: 10,000 baby boomers, those of you born between 1946 and 1966, 10,000 baby boomers will retire today. And that will happen every single day for the next 18 years. Some of you and your compadres in the baby boom generation will volunteer to retire, and some will be voluntold to retire. The point simply is 10,000 boomers retiring affects you personally. Well, how so, Jay? Well, I want you to think about your cell phone. Think about this cell phone of yours, if you've got this, or your Rolodex. Who's in here? Who are the most valuable people to you in here? I mean, the people you can call and you can get the front row tickets. You can get the appointment. You can get the order. Who are they? Are they baby boomers? Because if they are, in the next 18 years, they're going to be one of those 10,000. And when they step off of that position that they hold, you might just be out of relevance, out of connection. True story. Multi-billion-dollar tech company. Let's just say you were the preferred provider of a service to them, that 90% of your income came from servicing this company. True story. You have, let's say, the CEO, the president, the vice president of HR, and the chief marketing officer all on speed dial. Huge influence. You're making tons of money off these guys. In 2016, that company was bought by a Chinese conglomerate, and all four of them were gone in one day, voluntold to retire. What does that do for you? Do you know the successor? The Gen X successor that thinks very differently than the boomer that had been there for 30-odd years? See, 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day has something to do with you. It affects you personally, but it also is going to affect you organizationally, whether that's your company or your community, your church. It doesn't matter. Organizationally, it's going to affect you. How? I was with the Kentucky State demographer a few years ago, and this guy keeps up with all the stats of Kentucky, right? And he said to me, he goes, you know, Jay, our physical bodies work pretty well until about age 70. And then at 70, some parts start to go bad. Need new hips and knees. Got to get new parts sometimes after 70. He said what's interesting is when baby boomers get over the wall of 70 in a big way, it's going to put pressure in places nobody's ever dreamed, like airports. Airports. By show of hands, how many of you all have ever had the experience of trying to catch a ridiculous connection in an airport where you've got like 3 minutes to run from one side of the airport to the other? Have you had that experience, right? Okay, so what happens in that situation? You know, you jump over the service dog, you knock the old person out of the way, you push the kid, and you fall in backwards into your seat in a pool of sweat. Whew, we made it. That's not going to happen with a bad bunch of hips and knees. And there aren't enough beeping golf carts to hustle this generation around. We're going to have to redo air travel. The next time any of you all fly, I challenge you to think about tonight and intentionally observe how many sky caps are pushing people in wheelchairs. I was flying through Atlanta just the other day, and I had 2 sky caps pushing 2 each through the airport. There's not enough sky caps to take this generation and move that. We're going to have to redo the organization. That's going to put pressure on you. How are you going to redo your organization with 10,000 boomers retiring? What kind of pressure does that put on you and your team? Because it will put pressure. There's opportunity for that, but there's pressure. Here's the other 10,000 boomers coming this way, and we are in a 10-year window where millennials, those born between 1981 and 2000 roughly, have become the largest generation in the workplace. Millennials make up 55% of the workforce right now, but within 3 years will make up 70+% of the global workforce. What that means, gang, is whether you are one or outside of it, all are going to depend in some way, shape, or form on millennials. And boomers, before you all start down that path of the unicorns and everything, that's what everybody did with you all when you all came along. It's this massive group that's changing the system. The point simply is that every single day, these millennials become decision makers. And if you don't understand them, if you don't know how they think and how they talk and how they define certain things, then when they become the decision maker that you depend upon and you don't know the times or what to do, you're irrelevant. And that's not going to happen to you after tonight. That's the goal. So you will start to see how you fit into this equation. Let me show you a place where the two tens came together and it wasn't ready. This is a picture that my wife and I took at Disney World 3 years ago. If you've ever been to Disney and Hollywood Studios, especially that's where this was taken, you know it's got those quaint streets and everything's kind of packed in there tight and everything. In the middle of the screen you see an older person with bad hips and knees in one of those mechanized carts, and on both sides you have young couples with double strollers. They jammed the whole place up. You couldn't get around them. Disney wasn't built for the two tens, and they know it. Their infrastructure physically is not built to handle it. These are quotes from this year. Disney is redoing the Magic Kingdom. They're trying to take pieces out of Cinderella's moat and push it over into these areas where they can build bigger bridges because of the two tens. The question becomes, are you ready for the two tens? Whatever you do, whoever you represent tonight, what do 10,000 boomers retiring and millennials moving into decision-making roles have to do with you? A lot. And it can be exciting quick, or it can be really, really scary. And what I find most people do is they get really worked up because they don't know what to do, and they just stand on the beach and they stare at this giant tsunami that's coming in, and they say, come on, I think I can take it. And I would challenge you that maybe that's not the best plan. I would say that I would want you to grab a surfboard and learn how to navigate this. Yeah, it's terrifying. But those who understand it and can navigate it will be the most relevant and influential people, regardless of your age. It does not matter how old you are in this room tonight. You can be the most relevant person in your world by knowing this. So, truth is truth. And I was standing on a stage 10 years ago, and I made the statement of, first time in history that there's ever been 4 generations working side by side, because that's what I had read. And then God kind of put me in this headlock and said, no, actually it's happened once before. I can show you where it is. And it's in 2 books of the Bible that you probably don't hang out in a whole lot, Deuteronomy and Joshua. But what's cool is that in these 2 books, there are 4 separate generations sitting side by side. And I just started taking a look at what they were doing and which one does what. And it's a roadmap for every single person in here tonight. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk you through every generation and just teach you a little bit about who they are, what makes them tick, and how to communicate. And then I'm going to show you, here's what the Bible was saying about this, because I think it's kind of the marching order as to, hey, here's what you go do next if you're in that generation. And it'll get exciting quick. Let's start with traditionals. Traditionals were born before 1946. Traditionals were influenced by things like the Great Depression, Pearl Harbor, World War II, the GI Bill, the Cold War. This is a shrinking demographic, but still very viable. My dad is 83 years old and he still works every single day. He's kind of the foremost authority on concrete in the world right now. And the point simply is that these folks may not hold the title anymore they used to. My dad is not the fill in the blank of what he was, but they lead through influence, through being mentors, advisors, grandparents, and parents. And this generation is extremely viable and valuable right now. And we're going to talk about that. Here's the first thing you need to know about this generation. If you work with them, deal with them, you got to know they love rules. They love rules and structure, and why wouldn't they? Think of the public works programs of FDR, the military bureaucracy of post-World War II, or of World War II, the corporate bureaucracy of post-World War II. These guys and gals love rules and structure, and they don't like it if you just go and change it on them. Second thing is this. Take an extra minute when you're with these folks. See, if you're in this generation, you've seen more change than all of us. You're not adverse to change. What you are adverse to is someone changing something and not telling you. Just changing it for change's sake. And so what I would challenge you to understand is when you take an extra minute with this generation, especially when you're going to change something and you have that conversation, you give this generation the one thing they don't get anymore: respect. And you can build a bridge very quickly. And this group has more institutional knowledge that they are ready to share with somebody. They'll just take an extra minute. So how do you connect? How do you take that and connect? It's through this image. I want you to burn the image of hourglass versus Apple Watch. Hourglass versus Apple Watch. You have to operate on their time, not your time. This is a group that isn't going to speed up for you. They're just not. So you have to slow down for them. But if you will slow down and hang out with this group, the institutional knowledge that they can share, the cool stuff that they've seen in their lifetime that they want to impart to somebody that's willing to listen, it's amazing what can happen. The other reason why there's an hourglass is because time is running out. It is much shorter on this side of it, and that's okay. So that's why it's more intense right now, and you should spend time. And the younger you are, the more folks of this age you need to find and hang out with and just listen. We talked about that tonight downstairs, that we're just not real good at listening anymore. We're good at talking. We're all good at talking. But this is a group you really should listen to. So here's the biblical truth that hit me. In the story in Deuteronomy and Joshua, you have this character of Moses. And Moses is at the end of his life, and he knows he's not going into the promised land. And so he was doing two things that were really interesting. He was educating the masses, all the children of Israel. He was saying, hey, don't forget this. Remember this. Know this. This is what a lifetime of following God looks like in my eyes. When you go in, make sure you're doing this. Don't forget that. And he was doing all of that while he was investing in the one. He was saying, Joshua's my guy. I'm pouring it into Joshua. He's my mentee. If you're in this generation, I would challenge you that that's what you should be doing. You should be telling everybody possible of what your life has been and what it looks like and what you've learned, because we really need it. We really do need it. And if you don't tell us, who is? But I would also challenge you to find somebody you're pouring into and saying, this is the person, this is the special person I want to give more to. Who's somebody in your world that can do that, that you can do that with? And if you work with people in this generation, if you interface with these folks, you need what they got. You need to take that extra minute and ask them. Talk to them. We're still learning from Moses. We can dig into Deuteronomy and learn what this guy was doing because it was all written down. Today it may be a YouTube channel that has everybody telling what's going on. The point simply is, think about the institutional knowledge that we lose every single day, that we lose some of these folks. I don't ever want to see it happen again. I would challenge this church and anybody in this community that's serious about making this place better to laser in on these folks. Laser in, because the hourglass is running out. Eventually this generation will step off the stage completely and be replaced by Gen Z. And if we don't capture it now, it's not there. So that's traditionals. Boomers. Boomers, you all were born between 1946 and 1966. How many fall in that category in the room? Right? Largest generation ever. You guys affected everything you touched as you came through the system. In 1952, every municipal school system in America freaked out when all these first graders just showed up. And you all just kept showing up every year. More and more and more of you all. It's huge. And everything you've ever touched as you've rolled through the system has been impacted. So the first word that you have to remember when you work with boomers, or you are one, is this word freedom. Freedom from all those stinking rules of my parents. Because some of those rules said if you're a female, you can't be fill in the blank. If you're a certain color, you can't be fill in the blank. And your generation exploded glass ceilings, especially for women and minorities. So you've got a freedom mentality. That's a good thing. The second thing is there's this hunger for significance. You know you're going to be one of those 1,000 at some point. And you want your work to have mattered, your life to have mattered. And so there's this hunger for significance. Is all this worth it? This is a really big deal. It's a big deal. So anytime you deal with a boomer, the key piece is to put your name personally in the cornerstone of the building. Put your name in the cornerstone of the building. What do I mean by that? Boomers, it is so apparent that you have worked extremely hard for decades, and you've done amazing things. Amazing things. And it should matter that people remember your name and some of the things that you did. So it's my job as someone that's working with you to put your name into that cornerstone of the building, to help you be remembered for the person you want to be remembered for. So when you're working with boomers, the key thing is how can you put their personal name into that cornerstone of the building? I was the global senior sales trainer for a large for a large printer company. So printers are not exciting. Would we all agree on that tonight? Not a very sexy product, right? And so, you're training sales reps to go in and sell this and to primarily boomer decision makers. And so they would say, well, how in the world do you incorporate this into selling a printer? Well, it sounds something like this. Well, Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for having me in today. And, the work that you've done here under your leadership is amazing. I mean, your legacy is everywhere of efficiencies and just innovation. And I know we're just talking about a printer refresh tonight, but the monies that you save by doing this truly will take your legacy to exponential levels. Come on, guys, that's pretty good, man. That's a printer. Oh, is this thing on? Bottom line to it is that we were training our reps to help see how whatever this decision was that they put in front of them had some bearing on their personal legacy. Where people make the mistake is, oh, this is your business legacy. Well, your name may be on the building, but that doesn't matter. It's what about that personal name? And the biblical truth is there's a character in the Bible by the name of Caleb. And Caleb's kind of interesting because when you see him early on, he is part of these guys, these 12 guys that go in and scout out the land that the Israelites were supposed to take. And he and Joshua are the only two of the 12 that come back and go, we can do it. We can do this thing. The other 10 say, yeah, it looks great, but I don't think we can pull this off. And those 10 kind of infect the entire nation of Israel to go, and they start doubting. And so Israel has to wander for 40 years because 10 guys gave a bad report. But Caleb's one of the guys that said we could do it. Something that was not in his control cost him decades of waiting for his chance. What's great is that when they finally get back up to the promised land, they're at the Jordan River now, and Joshua has been the guy. I mean, Moses says Joshua's my guy, not Caleb, Joshua. Caleb doesn't go into a tailspin and get all upset over it. He says, I tell you what, good deal. Joshua, you're the leader. Give me the hardest part of your equation. Give me the hill country where those giants are. I was ready 40 years ago. Let's go. Boomers, I honestly believe that your generation was supposed to take the land. I really believe that you all were wired up as a generation to go and take the land and lead that charge. But much like the children of Israel, something happened. And it's now a different generation that's going in. But like Caleb, what if you took the hardest part of the equation for a younger leader? What if you didn't have to do it all? You just took the hardest part of the equation. Caleb is remembered in the Bible forever and ever and ever because of what he did in his later years when he wasn't the guy in charge, when he was the guy that was underneath the guy, when he took the second position, but he took the hardest part of the equation. Do you know the best example of that in our time right now? It just happened with the Super Bowl this year. If you watched the Super Bowl this year, you would probably say it was one of the most boring Super Bowls ever, right? If you're a Super Bowl fan, it was like low scoring, no scoring. And the storyline up until Gronkowski scores that last touchdown, the whole storyline was how the defense of the Rams was holding this amazing offense of the Patriots to 3 points the whole game. That was the storyline. And had they won, that would have been the story. The defense just shut down this amazing offense. Who's the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams? Oh, he's a guy named Wade Phillips. Wade Phillips was the head coach of a number of NFL teams for 20, 30, 40 years. He's the main guy. And he never got to the Super Bowl. He got to the AFC Championship a couple times. He was a coach at many different opportunities, but he didn't lead his team in and win the Super Bowl or even take them to the Super Bowl. But he's the defensive coordinator for the hottest coach in the NFL. Sean McVay is a millennial. He is the hottest coach right now, and every single NFL team is trying to figure out how to get the next Sean McVay. They're all trying to figure that out, and they can't. They've hired all this staff to go to these other teams this year. The point simply is this. This boomer, who's not the main guy, took the hardest equation and almost won the Super Bowl. He was completely reinvigorated with what his talent set was underneath the leadership of a younger leader. Boomers, I'm telling you, your best days may be ahead. You taking the hardest part of the equation in whatever is important to you and lining yourself up with younger leaders could be the solution to be remembered forever and put your legacy into that cornerstone forever. Just saying. Gen X, my generation, those of us born between 1966 and 1981, how many fall in that category in the room? My brother and sister, good to have you. Good to have you. We're the smallest generation of Americans. And we're squished between these two massive generations. So we got boomers on one side, and we got millennials on the other. So think of it like a dumbbell, like this giant weight here and giant weight there, and we're like the bar in the middle. We're this little skinny bar in the middle. Boomers, do you realize that you have dictated our entire work life? Our entire work life has been completely dictated by you as boomers. What we wear, what we do, how we work, hours, that type of thing. Do you know when you were trying to hire a bunch of us, like when we were first coming out of college and such, do you know you had to give us something? And the only thing we got one thing, Casual Friday. That's it. That's all we got. And don't be wearing jeans on Casual Friday because that's too casual. Khakis, collared shirt. Because we're not big enough to demand what we want. See, you're dealing with millennials now, and they're big enough. I'm not coming to work 3 days in a row. Heck, I'm going to stay home. I'll just work from home. Why can't we do that? Why can't we blow the whole thing up, right? We don't have that juice. So, Gen X, brother and sister, and here's my deal. You got to know what I'm talking about tonight better than anybody in the room. You got to be the people that really understand this multiple generation thing because we're not big enough to demand our way. We've got to do it through relationships. So, the first word, if you want to get to know us, is the word wealthy. We want to be wealthy. But we got a problem, don't we, my brethren, my sister? We can't define wealth. I mean, yeah, it's money. That's part of it. But it's also having a fulfilling job. And it's about lifelong learning. It's also about having good health. And it's about collecting experiences. And it's also about having quality relationships. And it's a little bit like the U2 song, If I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. Right? That's us. Second word you got to know with us is this word wise or wisdom. You can't be wealthy before you're wise. And let me just be the guy to call it out. There's been a fundamental lack of mentorship or discipleship for the last 30 or 40 years. And it shows up with us. Boomers, traditionals, you all have done awesome in so many places, but this is where you drop the ball. This is where it can come apart quick. I've had tons of people want to mentor me since I graduated from college in 1991, and they wanted to mentor me for 80% of what I made. That's not mentorship, that's extortion, you all. The bottom line to it is that boomers and traditionals, you've done phenomenal in so many places, but pouring it into the next generation, it's an Achilles heel. In fact, the gap between boomers and traditionals and Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z is something called the modern versus postmodern movement. It actually exists. And it's going to be something that really rips us apart unless boomers and traditionals, you start looking for people you can pour into. And Gen X brethren and sistren, millennials, we have to find people older than us and pour into them and be poured into. But here's the deal. If you wanted to influence me tonight, you wanted to sell me tonight on something, you have an idea, you are running for office, you're trying to raise money for something, and I'm a person of influence and you're trying to get me to buy. What do you need to know about me that would cause you to have an inside track to be able to do that? What do you need to know about our generation? Well, you need to know how we played video games. My brethren and my sister, what'd you play? Jeff, what'd you play? Galaga. What'd you play, my friends? Pac-Man, thank you. Donkey Kong, this is a religious ceremony right here we're having, right? All right. What else did you play? Centipede, Galaga, Defender. It was awesome. Playing in the arcade, putting those quarters in the arcade was so much fun. And you need to understand the mentality of why we were playing those games. Why did we put our quarters in those games? What were we chasing? The best, which was called high score. J-A-Y at the top, baby. Woo, look at me. All right, Gen X, here comes the deep psychological moment. You weren't ready for it, but lay back on the couch. Here it comes. You never knew this about yourself till tonight. All of those people on that board, all those positions on that board are 3 letters. They were always 3 letters. They were never people to us. We never compete against a person. We compete against a game. I don't know if you realize that about yourself, Gen X, but here's the deal. You aren't trying to beat someone. Boomers, this is one of the hardest concepts for you to get your head around because it's easy for you to look at Joe and go, I'm going to blow the doors off of Joe. I'm going to be better than Joe. We don't look at it that way. Even if we're hyper-competitive, we are trying to beat a game. You just need to know which game I'm trying to beat. What game am I putting my quarters into tonight? And the best way you can find that out, gang, is by asking me 2 simple questions. What are your top 2 priorities, Jay, right now? And why are those so important? I will tell you what game I'm putting my quarters into. Well, my top priority right now is my family, you know, and the business is kind of secondary to that, but the family is really super important, spending time with them and doing that in a way that we can run our business interchangeably. Whatever you're selling, whatever you're trying to get me to do, all you have to do is get those in line with the game I'm playing. Just like in the arcade, we put our quarters into that one game and we played it trying to get to the highest level possible, and then we stopped playing that one and we went to another game. You just need to know the game I'm trying to play and position whatever it is that you're trying to influence me on towards that game. Here's the biblical truth. We line up with Joshua. We're a leader who didn't seek out the position that we're actually in a lot of times. I'm a 4-term elected city council member and now a recovering politician. And the bottom line to it is I didn't seek that out. That really came looking for me. God put me in a headlock on that one. I didn't want it. And what's interesting is when you study the story of Joshua, as I mentioned earlier, he and Caleb are 2 guys 40 years earlier that say, we can do this, we can take this land. Decisions made basically not to go in. 40 years later, Moses says, this is my guy. Joshua's my guy. And what's interesting is if when you read the biblical account, he actually hears, be strong and very courageous. You can do it from Moses, his mentor, and he hears it from God. Like he actually hears God say, you can do it. And what's wild is that they cross over the Jordan. They get to the first battle, which is Jericho. And he gets a download as to the battle plan. Now, just picture yourself in this role. You got about 1 million people that have never really fought anywhere or fought anybody. You got a walled city. And the battle plan is we're going to break out the trumpets and the instruments. We're going to walk around. We're going to yell. Go team. Right? I mean, what in the world do you think in that situation? Like, but that's what they did. And the walls fall down. They take Jericho. They go to the next battle. It's a place called Ai. And unbeknownst to Joshua, the leader, somebody in the camp, a guy named Achan, he does something that was not a part of the plan. They weren't supposed to take anything. And this guy just kind of pocketed a gold wedge and a robe, it says, and go into the battle of Ai, and they lose 30 guys. Joshua comes apart, falls face down. I should have died in the desert. Why am I even living? That's us. We know we've been called to a leadership role, Gen X. We know we've been called to positions of authority and leadership. And when something goes wrong that's usually probably out of our control, what do? It's like, why am I even here? I don't want this. So he gets back up and he leads this army, this Israelite nation in, and they take a new place to live. He will do that. They take that leadership role. And I'm telling you, Gen X, that's where you are right now. You are in positions of leadership you didn't seek out, but you're supposed to be there. You're supposed to be in the position you're in, and you should take that leadership. You should find boomers and traditionals that will pour into you and will work with you to whatever that call is and go and be a magnet for a generation that will go fight. And that's who we're going to talk about next, is millennials. Millennials, you were born roughly between 81 and 2000, roughly, right? And as I said, you're the largest generation in the workplace, 55% right now, soon to be 70%. Huge. First word is focus, or lack of focus sometimes. But here's what's wild. You're a generation that grew up with a screen that has 45,000 things on it simultaneously. You have the technology to do 85,000 things simultaneously. And every single one of us that is older than this group, we told them from the crib, the more you can do simultaneously, the more valuable you're going to be. Multitask. And these guys are great at it, and we blame them for it. How crazy is that? We taught them to do it. We gave them the technology to do it. And we're going to blame them? Millennials, raise your hand in the room. Born between 81 and 2000. Don't alligator arm me. Come on, give me some love. They're all on this side. It's like, in a wedding where like, this is the bride, this is the groom. So let me talk to the bride side. So the bottom line is this. Let me tell you something that nobody else is going to tell you. You are so valuable. You are so valuable to today's workplace. Because we don't do work like we used to. We don't do project A to completion, project B to completion. We're doing project A, B, Q, triple Z, all at the same time. And you can handle it. Totally handle it. But here's the challenge. It's the second word. The technology that you have in the world that you've grown up in has told you that you can do everything simultaneously. You can multitask. Do you know there's actually no such thing as multitasking? The science shows it's actually called task switching. You can do it in nanoseconds, but it is also the most physically and physiologically damaging thing to do to your body. There was a book that was written by a millennial. She was 25 years old, and it was called Burnout. And I was doing this, one of these sessions with a bunch of boomer business leaders, and they all went nuts. I mean, they were just railing. They're like, burnout, 25, this is ridiculous. Ah! Unicorns, ah! The whole bit, right? But what's interesting is, if you take what I just said and realize that task switching is the most damaging thing you can do to your body physiologically, then it speeds up how fast someone can feel burned out. So you can write a book about burnout at 25. it is actually possible. Because the lie is that you can do everything at the same time. And that's not true. There is something called priority. There are things that are more important than the next. Millennials, here's what's interesting. You suffer from a horrible condition. Sorry to break it to you tonight. It's called the candy corn effect. The candy corn effect. Have you ever eaten candy corn before? Isn't it awesome when you start out? It's like, oh, it's so amazing. It's like crack. This is great. And then you just have one too many. Like if I'd stopped at 75, not gone to 77, I've been all right, right? That's how millennials take on projects. You may be able to do 26 projects simultaneously, no problem. 27 hangs you out to dry. You may be able to do 75 projects. 76 is the one that just gets you. Here's what I want you to understand. Millennials in the room, when you see things drop, when you can't keep it all going simultaneously, you've hit the candy corn effect. You've got to take some things off. Those of you that have millennials in your home or you work with millennials, when you see them dropping things at work, they've hit the candy corn effect. Look for something you can take off their plate that is non-essential to the job, and they'll right themselves. And that's the teachable moment. Millennials will not let you teach them, because the world that they grew up in says the information is just there, I'll go find it. I mean, think about this for a second. Do you realize in the world that we live in today, there is no need for a teacher in the traditional sense? A teacher was someone that dispensed wisdom. That's not needed anymore. It's all out there. I can find it online somewhere. The role of a teacher has moved to being a discerner of information, not a dispenser. A discerner, because we all know that the internet isn't 100% accurate. We do know that, right? Right? Wikipedia is not 100% accurate. The bottom line to it is what is truth? And that is really hard to wrestle with when everything can be gotten from somewhere else. So prioritization is a big deal. The candy corn effect is real, but it's also the teachable moment. It's where you have the opportunity to invest in this group. Let me give you two other words for this group that's super important. Community is big. These guys have grown up solving problems together, hanging out with certain groups together. They were in play groups together, in pods, and so they want to solve problems together. So the question becomes, what type of community are you offering where you work, or in this church, or in this community itself? What type of problem solving do you have that these folks can be a part of? We were downstairs before this, there was a meal, we were talking through some community issues with that group, and here's what's fascinating. You want to solve some of the problems we talked about down there? Why are you not asking those that are in college and high school right now to be your R&D department? Ask them what they think. Ask them how they would solve the opioid epidemic. Ask them how they would feed hungry kids in school. What's amazing is that these folks want to solve problems together in community. And community does not physically mean sitting side by side. Community can be in a headset globally. That's the world we live in. And that's what's exciting about the times that we live. Here's the other word that's important. You better be real. You better be real. These guys want the real deal. Don't just talk some talk. Don't bait and switch these guys. If you ever do with this group, they will burn you to the ground on social media. They'll just burn you to the ground. So don't do it. Be people that are real. This is a bunch that would rather go to Paris, France than Paris, Epcot. They want the real thing. So be the real thing. You need to be real and authentic. So how do you move this group? How do you get them on your side? Well, you got to know how they played video games, because it's not like us, Gen X. Do you realize that every single game that you're seeing on that screen has nothing to do with points? Even Madden football or the NBA or NCAA has nothing to do with points. It has everything to do with controlling the story. I can make Aaron Rodgers play for the Oakland Raiders in my story. Here's what you need to know, millennials, about yourself. You are God-wired to change the world. It is in you. And if I looked you eyeball to eyeball and asked you, you know you're supposed to change the world, don't you? Somewhere down deep inside, you know that. It shows up in your games. You want to control the story now. I don't want to wait. I want it now. And here's the one thing that will save your sanity. Do you all realize there are two things that you cannot speed up in this world? Everything else you can pretty much speed up. But there are two things, relationships and job skills. It's the only two things you cannot speed up. Millennials, if you will understand that, it will save your sanity. It takes time for relationships and it takes time for job skills. But everything else you can speed up. And the point simply is this. Millennials want to have impact. They want to change the world now. 2008, forget your politics. It doesn't matter if you loved or hated President Obama. 2008, what was his campaign slogan? Change what? Change the world. Believe in change. Change the world. Here's what's fascinating. The Obama campaign broke with traditional political wisdom. Political wisdom says older people vote, younger people don't. Millennials weren't, half the generation wasn't even old enough to vote. And the campaign, the Obama campaign, went after this group because they knew something important. They wanted to change the world, and they created a message that said, just get me elected, we'll go change the world. If you want to move millennials tonight in this community, for this church, for your business, simple, super simple. All you got to do is show them how to change the world doing whatever it is they're doing right now. I have to articulate how you can change the world doing exactly what you're doing now. You don't have to do something different. The guy that ran Obama's web campaign is a acquaintance of mine in Lexington. He's a business owner in Lexington. And he kind of made his money on that campaign. But one of the things they did that was genius was inside of Madden's EA Sports, when they launched it in 2008 in the campaign year, they bought advertising inside the ball game. What that meant is you and I are playing the game, and on the Jumbotron, inside the game, Obama's ads were running. Get me elected, we'll change the world. You and I can just sit here and play this game and get this guy elected, and we can change the world, let's go. The point simply is millennials and Gen Z want to know why you do what you do. They want to align their whys with you. Guys and gals, tonight you got to articulate why you do what you do. Why is this so important to you, your business, this community, this church? Why is it so important to you? Are you articulating it, or are you leaving it for people to guess why it's important to work wherever you work? This group wants to hear it, and they will align with you. They will follow you if that why lines up to their vision of, hey, I can change the world with this guy or gal. This generation plays in campaign mode multiplayer, meaning they want to do it together with their friends. Gen X, when we played our video games, we put a hard quarter into a game, and you never played a game that you would lose 3 lives like that. That was dumb. It was a hard quarter. It hurt when you lost those lives. This generation has grown up playing a game where if they make a mistake, they just regenerate. Yep, I don't walk down that hall, I get shot. I'll go down here, right? And so the point simply is they've learned to do and solve problems together with friends. And they're in a constant state of learning. And that's what they want. When you understand that, you can take the best and the brightest from that generation. Don't be that guy or gal standing on the beach waiting for the tsunami to hit. Don't do it. This group is too big. Ride the surfboard. Here's the biblical truth. The children of Israel, it says, grew up in the desert with a conqueror's mentality. They wanted to change the world. And they were kind of walking in a circle for 40 years. And Joshua and Caleb said, hey, let's go this way, guys. So this generational thing started to pull this group. This group is the group that started to fight. And they took the land. And they started taking the land one town at a time, one battle at a time. They had a conqueror's mentality. And millennials, you do too. My job as a leader is to help harness that and focus that and put it in the right direction so that we go do something great together. Let's talk about Gen Z real quick because there's some blurred lines. Some folks say that Gen Z is already in college or getting ready to get out of college, and that may be true, but it's safe to say that Gen Z is definitely high school down to kindergarten. You're safe with that. Let me tell you a couple things about Gen Z real fast. Gen Z is the first generation to reverse technology adoption. First generation in history. Think about this for a second. When technology gets created, it's created by someone older that build something. Think about the first cell phone, 1973. Remember how it was a giant brick that was like this big and cost like $10,000, right? And then over time, the technology got smaller and it got cheaper, and it gets co-opted by younger people, and they take it over, right? For some of you all, it was this giant radio, and then those darn kids taking that rock and roll, right? That's how this technology gets adopted down this way. But technology is cheap or free now, and it's globally ubiquitous, which means that a kid, a 16-year-old in India, has more in common with a 16-year-old in America than they do with a 65-year-old in India. The platforms and the technology is free and cheap and easy to get to, and so therefore this generation can globally reverse technology adoption, meaning you have to adopt their technology to talk to them. You actually have to get Snapchat to talk to these folks. And everybody's like, oh, I can't believe it, man. They're on this, on screens all the time, the Snapchat. It's no different than us talking on the phone when we were growing up. Do you realize Instagram to them is where they put out their public info, what they want to see folks to see globally, but Snapchat is how they talk to each other one-on-one? Hey, I just want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to anybody else. I don't want that conversation recorded. All right? It's no different than the technology we grew up with. They're just using what they have in that way. But you actually have to use their technology to deal with them. It's fascinating to see how athletes, college athletes, that are high school, that are being recruited by colleges, you have to have your own highlight reel on your own YouTube channel. You have to have your Instagram account that you're sending the coaches to. You are running the recruiting process. So the bottom line to it is these guys reverse technology adoption. The other thing about them that's kind of fascinating is that they are micro-learners. Micro-learners is simply this. I learn one thing in about 5 minutes or less, one skill. So I go to YouTube, right? If you want to learn how to cook a flan tonight, you go to YouTube, how to cook a flan. Well, the best micro-learning story is 8-year-old boy's watching his 5-year-old sister. Dad is asleep. He's babysitting. They wanted a McDonald's cheeseburger. So my man goes to YouTube, how to drive a car. True story. How to drive a car. Learns how to drive a car on YouTube, takes his dad's keys, 5-year-old sister, and they go to McDonald's. And they get busted in the drive-thru line because he didn't have any money. He didn't watch that video, and now you pay for it. The bottom line is, that's micro-learning. This is micro-learning. And it's what we all do. So if you're in training or you're trying to educate people, this is how we learn now. One thing that you're trying to learn, 5 minutes or less. I go to YouTube to learn it. So if you have training modules wherever you work, you better start to break those hour-long training modules into 5 minutes or less, into little bricks of models. Because this group and everybody else, that's how we learn. So Gen Z is coming like a freight train. And Gen Z, this is another one. Let me just show you this one real quick. This is how this technology is starting to work. These sisters thought that every kid should have the ability to get a bedtime story. So they read bedtime stories on Facebook. It's recorded. And kids can use that technology and have them read them their bedtime story in case their parents can't. This is the world that we're in. This is exciting stuff. But you got to know the times. You got to know how this stuff works. And if you don't know how to relate to other people up and down the line, you miss out on all this richness. Here's the biblical truth. It's really all about these guys. It's about this generation. And this hit me like a ton of bricks about 2 months ago, you all. The saddest verse in the Bible may be Judges 2, where it says a generation basically grew up after Joshua's generation died, and they didn't know God. They didn't know what was important. What I'm telling you tonight is whatever's important in your world, whether it's the gospel or it's the importance of your family's tradition, it's the importance of your business, whatever's important to you, it's about these guys. Will they know it's important? Will they understand what they need to fight for? We talked earlier tonight about apathy being just rampant. Well, are these guys going to want to fight for what you fight for? That's the big question. And tonight, here's what I want you to understand as we start to tie a bow on it. It's simple. We've got to be better at building relationships with one another. We've got to know each other's generations better and not get so hung up on wanting it just my way. but rather, let me understand you a little bit better, and let me deliver it the way you want to. Let me tell you what's important to me, to our business, to our community, because it's about these guys. It's all about these guys. And it's super important you know that tonight. Let me just tie a bow with two kind of quick stories. One is the story of David and Goliath. We grew up with David and Goliath, and it's become too familiar. David and Goliath, what's interesting about those guys is they were real. They actually fought. And I want to tell you that historical event in a way that has three takeaways for you tonight. You have the two armies of the day. You have the Israelites and the Philistines. And they've come to a battle in a place called the Valley of Elah. And the Valley of Elah is an interesting place because it has two equal ridges in a bowl in the middle. And on one side you have the Philistines, on the other you have the Israelites. And neither one wants to run down in the valley and put themselves lower than their enemy, so they just look at each other. Well, in those days, one of the ways they solved that problem was they'd send out a champion, a one-on-one loser-leave-down match. Out of the Philistine camp walks Goliath, a 9-foot-tall, bred-for-war machine, dressed in the best armor of the day. And he shouts curses for 40 days and 40 nights. He comes down into the Valley of Elah and he says, for over a month, somebody fight me. Come on. Nobody wants to go, not even you, King Saul, let's go. He's trash talking in the Valley of Elah. Well, into that situation walks this shepherd boy. His name's David, and he's carrying some cheese and some bread to his brothers in the army. He knows nothing of this. He just walks into this situation. He sees this guy hooting and hollering. That's Kentucky for trash talking in the Valley of Elah. He's hooting and hollering, and he says, well, if nobody's going to fight him, I'll fight him. I fought the lion, fought the bear. God saved me from them. Let's go. He's like that chihuahua on the leash, you know. So think about this for a second. Imagine Saul's pumped. We got a guy. The word gets back. We got a guy that's going to fight. All right, we got a guy. And then he sees David. Oh, well, this isn't much. Wow, he's awful young. But something about David's enthusiasm changes the mind of the king. And he gets the deal. The king says, okay, go fight. But if you're going to fight, you're going to need some armor. Take mine. It's the best. The problem is Saul's a grown man. So he's got grown man armor on a kid. So you got a picture of a helmet over his eyes. He's dragging a shield and a spear around. He can't fight. It's too much of a good thing. Shucks it all off. Goes down to a creek bed. Picks up 5 rocks out of thousands of rocks in this creek bed. He picks up 5 rocks, puts them into his bag, goes into the Valley of Elah floor with 5 rocks in his bag. Pulls 1 rock out of the bag, and he puts it in exactly the right spot, and he drops a giant that day. And he doesn't just drop a giant, you all. He changed the balance of world power with a rock. 3 applications to you tonight. First, sometimes it's just your raw enthusiasm for what you do and what you're chasing and what you want that will change the mind of the decision maker. It doesn't matter what you look like, what the outside wrapper is. Sometimes your enthusiasm will carry the day when everything else works against you on the outside. Number 2, when David goes to fight, Saul says, here, take my armor. The problem is it's too much of a good thing. If you try and use everything I've talked about just in our time together tonight, when you walk out these doors, it's like Saul's armor. It won't be any good. It's too much of a good thing. I would challenge you that when you get a moment and get back to the house, jot down a couple of things, 5 things at the most, that you can put in your bag and start to fight with. You might be able to use something that was said tonight. And then come Monday, I want you to pull one of those rocks out of your bag and use it. Because if you take one thing out of here tonight, just one thing that changes everything for you, well, isn't it worth it? One thing that drops the biggest obstacle that stands in your way for success, wouldn't it be worth it to come tonight? Forget all the other stuff. You don't need it. Shuck it all off. You're not hurting my feelings. But one thing could change it all, change the balance of power. Well, here's the deal. I'll sum it all up with this. We give a lot of lip service to it's about relationships. It's all about relationships. But is it? I think it's more about these things these days. I think we substituted these things for real relationships. I think we really stink, actually, at relationships. I don't think we're good, and I think this group tonight needs to change that. And that's why you're here. You cannot have good relationships if you're not relevant, if you don't know what's going on, if you're just throwing your hands up, you're just apathetic. You can't change anything, but you know too much now tonight. You got the white Honda effect. You're going to start to see this stuff. You're going to be relevant. And you're going to be somebody that's excellent building relationships after tonight if you let yourself. Well, it doesn't matter who I talk to and what size of the group, where it is, I always end the same way. His name is Mark Halleck. He's a friend of mine. Mark came to me at the most critical time in my life, the lowest part of my life. You see, what won't ever show up on any kind of bio that's read to you about me is that in 2000, I was working for a kind of a niche financial service company. I was making phenomenal money. I was being put on a corporate jet, zipping around the country, pitching big deals. And on Monday, May 15th of 2000, I'd arrived. My boss and I were brokering $1 billion deal with the third largest bank in the world. And we were doing that deal over lunch at the White House. I don't care who you are. That's a good day. It's a good day. It's a really good day. That was Monday. We did the deal. I was 31 years old, and I was 10 days away from being a multimillionaire. That was Monday. Friday of the exact same week, the company I worked for was raided by 80 federal agents. I went from the White House to the outhouse, y'all, in 5 days. Didn't have a thing to do with it. So what do? How you make a living? How are you going to eat? Well, I've been talking about this generational thing. I thought, well, maybe somebody pay me to talk about it. Maybe I could make a living doing this, but I didn't know how to run a business. I stumbled in the door of SCORE, the Service Corps of Retired Executives, a nonprofit group of seniors that counsel small business owners for free, and I met Mark, and we hit it off. He was phenomenal. I would go in every Friday and drink really bad coffee with him and his buddies, and I would tell him about what I was doing, and man, I've got this gig. I'm going to speak down in Henderson, Kentucky, and it's going to be this, that, and the other. And Mark would say, wow, man, you give me more energy than these pills I've been taking. This is great. And we just hit it off. One day I said, Mark, we're having so much fun together. You being a 70-something, me being a 30-something. I wish I could do this more for SCORE, like everywhere. He picks up the phone and he calls the main guy at SCORE Nashville in D.C. and he said, Ken, I got this young mentee, greatest speaker you've ever heard, can light up a room, have people swinging from the chandeliers. You got to have him speak at all of our national meetings. You know what's awesome about that phone call? Mark had never heard me speak. He saw something in me I didn't see in myself. Well, that phone call led to 2 years of traveling all over the U.S. speaking to seniors about younger people and what they needed from them. And while I've had a blast with you all tonight, I got to tell you, November 2002, San Diego, California, I walk off the stage after doing something similar like this, and this very distinguished gentleman comes up from the back, and he's got a tie on and cufflinks, pocket square. He's about 6'5". He comes up and he grabs me really tight and he starts crying. And he said, I'm really sorry. I got this emotional about it. I'm really sorry. But I just haven't been told I've been needed in a long time. Thank you. You know who that cat was? He was the president of the SCORE board. The chairman of the board. Multi-millionaire from St. Louis. Family man, grandfather, businessman, and some guy stands on a stage in a place where I don't even know if I'm going to be able to eat the next week, and I say something that causes that guy to have that reaction. What can you do? What can you do? Think of the people in your sphere of influence tonight that only you can touch. I can't get to them. Only people that you can get to, that you work with, that you're neighbors to, that you can just say, you know what, you're valuable. You're super valuable. And see, you all know a whole lot more now. You've got inside dope. You know how to even talk to them at a much deeper level. The point simply is this. We stink at relationships, and this group has to change it. It's got to start with you. Nobody else can do it but you. Fast forward. Mark's health starts to decline a few years ago, and I knew he was going to pass away. And he died and was buried on Monday, February 15th. And the reason I can tell you the exact day is because it's my birthday. I can't make this up. It was a terrible snowstorm in Lexington, and I slid my way out to the funeral home, or to the cemetery, and I walked into the office and I said, hey, I'm here for the Halleck funeral, but I don't know where to go. His adult children were there, and they said, oh, that's our dad. And I said, well, you know what? I'm Jay. I'm the guy they did the national story on your dad and I and our relationship and what a mentor he was to me. And And I said, you know, everywhere I speak, no matter who I talk to, I tell the story of your dad and what he meant to me at that critical time in my life. And they said, would you say that at his funeral? Sure. Y'all, there were 6 people at that funeral besides his family. This man was a businessman, World War II hero, personal friends of Adolf Rupp. He's an amazing man. 6 people outside of his family. Now, you could say that's sad and that's a tragedy. Or you could say that out of those 6, there's a guy that was at that funeral that just told you about this man's life and who he was and what he meant to me. 2 challenges, and I'm done. First is this. Who is standing in front of a room full of strangers like I am with you tonight, talking about you the way I talk about Mark? I mean, seriously, who is out there right now that's saying, let me tell you about this guy. I don't know where I would be without him. Let me tell you about this lady. She paid a bill for me when I didn't know what was going to happen. Who's standing out there talking about you like I talk about Mark? The answer is, I don't know if there's anybody. Guess what? 4 separate generations working side by side that is confounding every single person around you, and you now know the times. And you can know what to do. And you can be excellent at building relationships because you're relevant. You got relevant information. You got stuff that people want now. All of a sudden, you can build relationships and pour into people like nobody's business because you were here tonight. That's the first challenge. Second challenge is simply this. In the next 7 days, every single person in this room, I challenge you to find somebody that you deem important in your life. And I don't care how you define important. Someone you deem important, and I want you to go to breakfast, lunch, or dinner with them, and I want you to take your watch off, and I want you to take your phone out and leave them in the car. Because if you can't have time with somebody you deem important without your phone and your watch on, then you're off the skids. Let me just tell you, you're redlining. This is your wake-up call tonight. It's about relationships. That's the stuff that matters. And you guys took time out of your day to come tonight, and whatever brought you in the door, you've now heard. You now know. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. Be excellent at getting into people's lives. Be excellent at bringing value to someone else, and your legacy will be secured. The success level you go to will be immeasurable, and you truly can change the world. David, I want to thank you so much for having me tonight, and I want to thank every single one of you all for giving me a lot more than 8 seconds of your time. I'm done.